And I'm delighted. This is our penultimate admissions committee presentation. We have one more next week with UC San Diego, but I was delighted when Yale reached out to us over the summer and floated the idea of huddling with us, talking to pre-meds about their process. Like some of the other programs, we will be recording, with Yale's permission, the formal portion of the presentation. Um, and maybe before we get going, and maybe Dr. Choisy, you can introduce yourself to our team or our students here, and then I'll let your team members also introduce themselves before Vincent maybe runs the show. So, Dr. Choisy, can you get us started with intros?
All right, thank you, David. I am Erik Choisy. Although most of my colleagues around the country who are directors of admissions at med schools are doctors, I'm actually a lawyer by training, so no reason to call me doctor. Just call me Erik. I'm happy to introduce Nancy Barrett and Vincent Pellicone, our assistant directors here at the Yale School of Medicine. Before we get too deep into it, I do want to thank David for allowing us to speak with you all today. As I wrote to David earlier this summer, UC Santa Barbara, when I look at the applicants we've received historically at Yale from your school, there's some of the strongest applicants. Yet, UC Santa Barbara students are applying to the Yale School of Medicine at a lower rate than they are applying to med school more broadly. So really hoping that more of you will consider coming to med school in New Haven. So for today's session, we're going to do a brief presentation, about a half hour, giving you an overview of what's unique about the Yale School of Medicine. From there, we're going to open it up to Q&A, where no questions will be out of bounds or off limits. So Vincent, take it from here, my friend.
Sure. Okay, so that classic disclaimer for everyone, screens may shift as I get everything set up, so just bear with us a few seconds and then we'll get underway. So I share the screen there. You should all see UC Santa Barbara. So hello again, everyone. Welcome. We invite you to see yourself at Yale today. So let us begin. Just one more quick check and we look good. All right. So during this info session, I, along with my colleagues, we plan to present the experience of being a student at Yale School of Medicine and leaving plenty of time at Q&A at the end. But if you have questions, you're welcome to start dropping them in the chat. That is certainly welcome to do that. And on the screen, you see the various topics we're going to address. Now, Yale School of Medicine, we have been around for many years. We are the 6th oldest medical school in the United States, founded in 1810, and we've played a significant role in the field of medicine, focused on improving individual and public health outcomes through education, research, and patient care. A lot of this work is driven by our Yale system of medical education, this educational philosophy, identity, way of life, as you may even call it, that really the students champion and celebrate, and why consistently many folks regard us as a very happy, warm, inviting place to go to medical school. So what does that look like? Let's advance the slide and go forward, talking about our Yale system. I want to start by just emphasizing our mission here of what we're doing at Yale. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but you can see it listed up here. I'm just going to extract some key highlights, right? We at Yale are trying to educate and nurture creative leaders in these fields of medicine and science. We find students who are curious. They are inquisitive. They are thinking, how can I push the boundaries of medicine and science? And I want to do this in an environment that is inclusive as well as diverse. Forging partnerships with members across our School of Medicine, Yale University, our local community, and the world, doing this work, caring with compassion and commitment to improving the health of all people. This is all the framework of our dean, Nancy Brown, who's been at the helm since 2020, our first female dean of Yale School of Medicine, and we're really proud of the work and vision of what's going on here at Yale. So, this system, it is the cornerstone of the work that all that we do here at Yale School of Medicine. We recognize students as mature, self-motivated adults. For example, in the first portion of your time when you're enrolled here in this pre-clerkship phase, you might have a combination of lecture and laboratory coursework. These lecture courses are optional, in-person attendance. You don't have to go to them in person. Asking yourself the question, how do you best learn? Do you want to go to lectures in person? You could do that. Do you want to watch them on an iPad afterwards, which we provide to students? Are you like me and do you love watching videos at 2x speed? You can do that even on the iPad that's given to you. Do you want to use it as a reference point? Putting you a little bit more in charge of how you're going to be learning. When you are going through medical school, for folks who may be aware or may not be aware, with an end goal of trying to match into a residency program at the conclusion of medical school. Medical schools normally will send out a rankings sheet where they will rank you of your class as you're going into these residency match programs. We do not have any class rankings. Even in these committee letters to residency programs, you are more than a number, you are you. We value the qualitative assessment of who you are. Exams are anonymized. The design behind this is that students themselves, again, these mature, self-motivated adults, they are encouraged to seek out remediation, support, learning, and growth. And why are we doing all this? Leaving more time for your interests, helping you learn in your own way, evidence of strong match success year over year, which we're happy to unpack if folks have questions there. We can point you to some resources. But how about also this idea that you want to spend your time in medical school not just sweating and grinding against the person near you? How about learning from and with each other in a close-knit, warm environment where we're eliminating a competition externally? Folks living near each other, surrounded by this vibrant college community, our students are consistently happy and welcome and supportive. Bottom line, this is a system that reduces stress, promotes wellness, all while advancing excellence. So let's dive into some of the nuts and bolts of what the experience would be like here. Starting with the top, importantly, with what you're trying to learn here, the academics. So I have a little chart up here that's going to outline what the curriculum would look like over our 4 years. To just keep it at the 10,000-foot view, essentially going to introduce it in 3 phases, the colors that you see on your screen. So starting with the dark blue, this would be your first year of med school and the first part of your second year, we call the pre-clerkship phase, where you can be taking some of these lecture and laboratory coursework, learning about the human body from the cellular to the organ level, highlighted by the mechanisms in treatment of disease, where you won't just learn in large lecture halls, right? Our class size is 104 students each year, and you're going to be learning in small team environments and begin practice your clinical skills along the way with some of our state-of-the-art practicing facilities. You then migrate towards the next phase, this sort of salmon color here, clerkships. You begin rotating in the hospital and clinical settings. You'll do 4 12-week longitudinal clerkships where we are appropriately juxtaposing some of the fields of medicine as you're going to be doing these clerkships. So in an example, maybe you're doing a biopsychosocial clerkship where you're going to be doing primary care and psychiatry. Why? The basis in understanding that the physical ailments that are happening with the body may be connected psychiatrically. And so as a result, it's important to try to maybe juxtapose those 2 areas, see how you can appropriately care for patients at all of their physical and mental states accordingly. Each of these clerkship blocks have courses on communication, professionalism, and also tying back to a key point, health equity along the way. And then in the final phase, this aqua blue color, you have the advanced training period, a time to prepare, well, to really discern which specialty you want to go into, completing a sub-internships, taking electives, working on your medical thesis. We'll get into that just a little bit later. And then ultimately pursuing on into some capstone courses to synthesize all the work that you've done in your time in medical school, and then joyously celebrate in the match process, and then ultimately finish your time here. So we are a research-oriented medical school as well. What is that going to look like? Well, we take an exceptional commitment to research, specifically through our Office of Student Research, led by our 2 associate deans, Dr. Chowdhury and Dr. Herzog. They guide and support our students in the fundamentals of research. Maybe you've come in with a lot of research before. Maybe you haven't come in with research before. But they're going to give you that strong basis and help uplift you in your work as being a research-based scientist. They are there to help you select research mentors, right? Topics for your thesis project. We ask all medical students to complete the thesis. I have a slide on that just coming up shortly. And this office also helps you seek out substantial sources for funding. So we are not just a place that says, go out and do research. Good luck finding the funds to do this. They want to help and guide you with that along the way. Now, some students, as they have all these opportunities between research and working on their thesis, they find they might want just a little bit more time to complete all this work. So we actually allow students to take what we call this optional flex year. In between the 3rd and 4th academic year, you would take an additional year. So you're going essentially from year 1 to 2 to 3 to flex, and then you come back into the curriculum in the 4th and final year. What can you be doing during this optional flex year? We'll get into that a little bit later, but one example could be working on some of these research aspects, really delving into some of the data, rolling up your, well, you wouldn't really be rolling up your sleeves, because if you're wearing gloves, that probably wouldn't be a good look in a wet lab. Maybe you're doing wet lab research. Maybe you're doing public health research. You have a variety of different ways to get involved in it. Want to also highlight here just but one example of how students are getting involved in research. We have on the screen our Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine. It is a PubMed Index student-run open access quarterly scientific journal with, I got to tell you, some really interesting scientific materials that fly over my head. I didn't make it my own self past high school biology, so kudos to all of you on the pre-med track. But there really is, some great student-run quality research coming out of here, and we're giving you that agency to begin that career as a researcher. And on to this point of a thesis requirement. We are one of few schools that require a medical thesis. Why? A, we want students to engage in critical inquiry, to apply the scientific method to the field of medicine, but to also develop close working relationships with faculty research mentors. I think this is a very underrated aspect because we really value getting to know the students, the qualitative aspect, the work that you can do in guiding under some of these research mentors unlock and open pathways and doors for you as you advance your career. So we're really happy to have that as part of our culture here. Furthermore, we want students to ultimately succeed as they're going towards residency match placement rates. There is consistent data which show that the completion of a lot of research while you're in medical school correlates well with success matching at top programs. So there's a perk. And so on this topic of doing your thesis, right, it doesn't just have to be wet lab research. It could be health policy, public health, humanities, the history of medicine. We're even seeing some students talk about how the application of AI and the intersection of that in medicine, some really, really fun stuff. And we have been consistently ranked as one of the most funded medical schools, again, just to tie in how many research opportunities are available to students. Now, you might be thinking, Vincent and Yale School of Medicine admissions, this is all great, but tell me a little bit more. What are some other things that I want to get in, I can get involved in? Because that sounds great, but I like other things besides research. Well, we have some other wonderful special programs. I highlight just a few here on the screen. Maybe you're very passionate about biomedical ethics, a wonderful seminar series and workshop program to be able to delve into this very important topic. Maybe you really believe in the intersection of humanities with medicine, and so we have a wonderful program for humanities and medicine, thinking about art, narrative, how you care for patients, maybe doing some journaling reflective exercises, which can make you that better physician. Maybe you're very passionate about helping people beyond our borders and going out into the world, doing field placements in global settings in a variety of different countries and continents. Or I might even want to plug, we define global health as caring for marginalized folks who don't receive access to care even within our borders here. Maybe you travel to the Appalachian region of the US and deliver care there. Maybe you're going out to a Indian land or Indian tribe area of the country and helping them with medical aspects while you're visiting there. Or you really just want to get involved in service. One example being our Haven Free Clinic, a full student-run clinic for primarily underinsured folks in New Haven who are very much in need and desire access to basic healthcare access, counseling, full wraparound social services, and you can get involved with that. Or on another academic front, you're really fascinated by this flex year coming up in the next slide. You want the chance to delve into some other academic disciplines. We have some other wonderful graduate and professional schools here. Maybe you want to get a Master's of Business Administration in our School of Management, Master's of Public Health in our School of Public Health, or you're interested in our MD PhD program where you're spending a little bit more time here and you have this opportunity to really sink your teeth into the pathway of becoming a physician scientist. On a final note here, before I turn it over to my colleague Nancy, I want to just highlight that within this flex year, you can work on research, you can work on your MD thesis, you can pursue this dual degree, the ATP electives, the advanced training period. So really discerning which topics are of interest to you. Oh, I really love my surgery rotation, but I'm also really interested in pediatrics. Maybe I need to find an elective that just helps me discern, to cut or to not cut, which moves to the bottom left position, talking about your residency specialty. I think in the long in the long grand scheme of this trajectory of becoming a physician, yes, you have medical school, or actually for all of you right now, I mean, it's certainly the applying to medical school portion, then actually getting into medical school, then doing your curriculum, then graduating, then going into residency, then you have fellowship. It seems like it's so far away to get to be that goal of the physician you want to be. What is but one more year pursuing the flex year to perhaps really discern what it is you want to do specifically, getting that right. And a final point here before I pass the baton over, that we see our students each year, a percentage of them will complete the flex year. Some, it varies each year to year, but cohorts have been averaging around 60 to 65% are doing a flex year, while the remaining percent happily go on and do their curriculum in 4 years. So by no means are you locked as everybody asked to do a flex year. We're just showing you the various roads ahead of you. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague Nancy to tee up the next topic. Nancy?
Okay, great. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about student life here at the Yale School of Medicine. I know that Vincent has already addressed several different topics that, again, are afforded to our students as a result of the Yale system. But I'd also like to talk a little bit about some of the support systems that are in place here at Yale. So next slide, please. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about a relatively new program that was just rolled out last year, and that is our new advisory houses. So you may be familiar with this concept from some undergraduate institutions in which you have residential houses. So these are not residential, but they nonetheless allow our students some sort of vertical integration. You get to know your classmates very, very well. As Vincent mentioned, there's only 104 students per class, but these 6 advisory houses kind of function as an opportunity to engage with not only other students, but faculty and staff. They provide opportunities for social engagement, community service opportunities, but also it's really an opportunity for networking too. And when people have great ideas for maybe a research project or maybe initiating a new student program or a new student club, this is a great way to actually engage with people who are maybe a year or two ahead of you or a year or two behind you. And it also kind of fosters this overall sense of mentoring and support, both from the peers as well as from our faculty and staff. So next slide. Within our 6 new advisory houses, there are the 6 heads of the houses. But in addition to these advisory house leaders, we also have a new program called the coaching program. And coaching supports our medical students' professional development. So they work with one-on-one with students. Each house has about anywhere between 3 and 4 of the coaches that work with each of our students. And it started off with a cohort of 18 coaches. It's now blossomed to 36 coaches. These are all faculty here at the School of Medicine. And they really do support individual students' progress in meeting both the milestones towards attaining their YSM 9 MD program competencies, but also just an overall sense of checking in on formative and summative assessments, self-reflections, which are extremely important parts of students' education here, providing some narrative feedback, and as well as kind of just reviewing some of the data as to how they're doing and checking in with them. You meet with your assigned coach one-on-one at least 4 times a year. And again, the feedback that we're getting from our students is that this is a very important innovation here at the School of Medicine that really has met a lot of the students' needs and has helped them to really understand exactly the new facets of the curriculum, but also these coaches are specifically trained in how to help the students to really realize their full potentials. Next slide, please. In addition to the advisory houses and the coaches, we also have a very extensive support system for all students, and not just in terms of academic support, but also an overall wellness perspective. And again, this is very consistent with the philosophy of the Yale system. So we cultivate a very supportive and non-competitive community, as my colleague Vincent mentioned. Students receive support and guidance from the Associate Dean for Student Affairs, who you see pictured in the upper left, Dr. John Francis, as well as from their academic advisors in the advisory houses, and they're listed, or they're shown there on the screen as well as from our YSM Mental Health and Wellness Program, which is led by our licensed clinical social worker, Lisa Ho, and she directs a 3-person office that really is very accessible on very short order. In addition, students also provide tremendous support to one another. And so both formally through programs like the peer advocates, and you see those shown on the screen, that's pictures of some of our peer advocates, but also through the Committee on the Well-Being of Students, as well as our very important affinity groups that are guided through our diversity office. I just can't underscore enough the supportive environment that the students provide, in addition to really just being able to unpack what it's like to be a first-year student, and they remember it very vividly, the upperclassmen. They also have something, as an example, Sunday Sherries, as opposed to Sunday Scaries. This is a student-led journaling group that meets every Sunday evening over Zoom, just to kind of touch base with people and make themselves kind of vulnerable to others, but also in a very supportive environment. And I think that's when you really get some of the best tips from both your classmates as well as from upperclassmen. Okay, so those are some of the support systems that are in place. In addition to that, I'd just like to touch base, next slide, please, on where are we? Where is the Yale School of Medicine? For those of you on the West Coast who have not ventured out to the East Coast, I just like to share with you that Yale is actually located in New Haven, Connecticut, which is optimally positioned between 2 of the Northeast metropolitan hubs, about halfway between Boston and New York City. There are Amtrak trail lines, as well as Metro North Railroad that provide easy transport up and down the Northeast Corridor. We have our own Union Station right here in New Haven, which is very convenient. We also have our own Connecticut Transit bus line, which has over 24 routes. Yale also provides a shuttle service all around New Haven. But the main thing I'd like to communicate to you is that New Haven is a very small and walkable city. The medical school is kind of located at the kind of southern pole of the Yale campus. But ideally, it is located directly across the street from Yale New Haven Hospital. But it's very accessible, just a few blocks away from downtown and the rest of the Yale campus, with lots of places to live, as well as fantastic places to go biking, jogging, really fantastic food scene. We also, Vincent mentioned our New Haven Free Clinic, so I think there are lots of opportunities to engage with the local community, not as an us versus them environment, but very much we are part of the community. And I think that kind of captures the overall culture here. The city of New Haven is exceedingly diverse, but in many ways it reflects the overall demographics of our country as a whole. And economic development stems from a lot of our research opportunities as well. So next slide, please. I mentioned some of the fun things to do in New Haven. It is a center for arts and culture, including lots of museums and theaters, music concerts, galleries, studios. There's a very diverse opportunities to sample all kinds of foods from around the world. It has the greatest number of restaurants per capita of any city in America. And for trivia fans, I'd like to point out that New Haven is actually the birthplace of the Abitz style of thin crust pizza at Pepe's, Modern, and Sally's. It's also the origin of the hamburger at Louis Lunch, as well as, interestingly enough, the lollipop, which was named after a racehorse back in 1908. So lots of really fun things to do here. And we have lots of students that come here from California that have made that transition very, very seamlessly. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to transition to something that you all, I'm sure, want to hear about, which is admissions. And so what is it that we are looking for from our applicants to the Yale School of Medicine? So I'm going to skip ahead to this slide. What qualities are we seeking? First of all, let me just reassure you that we read every single application and we view each application holistically and contextually. So we don't have any formulas or algorithms, rubrics, cutoffs. And our goal is really to expand all forms of diversity in terms of backgrounds, circumstances, perspectives, and lived experiences to ultimately yield the best incoming class here at Yale. So it's not about just what you've done, but it's really what you have experienced from any given thing that you include in your application. We really want to hear about what your contribution was to a given experience, as well as what did you get out of it? Have you really given some thought to exactly what it is you have learned from various experiences, and how will that ultimately contribute to the Yale School of Medicine? So, but most of all, we really want to select people who will thrive in our Yale system. It is very different from some of the cultures of other medical schools. So we encourage you to really think about the type of environment in which you think you will thrive, and then pick that school whose mission statement as well as overall teaching pedagogy matches your needs, not the other way around. But as Vincent mentioned, we're really looking for self-driven individuals who take ownership of their own education and really want to succeed on a variety of different fronts. So we are really looking for those who show evidence of excellence in a very broad range of activities: scholarship, research, leadership, and service. And that can be shown in a wide variety of very creative ways. We're looking for those who can work well with others and really display an interest and ability to work respectfully and collaboratively in this team-based learning environment. And lastly, we're looking for those who can demonstrate creativity, curiosity, and personal initiative. We're looking for, very much self-driven problem solvers. So, and in the end, we look for the 3 Ps: passion, persistence, and product. If you love something that we want to see that you've kept it going over a period of time, and you've really moved it from point A to point B. It can be a sport. It can be bench research. It can be an artistic talent. It can also be cultural advocacy. You can be a family caregiver. You can be overcoming a personal hardship, but we really want to hear your personal story. And ultimately, we want to see evidence that you are willing to be part of a team, because as you all know, medicine is very much a team sport. And within that you can also demonstrate empathy. And you can see the world as well as problems from others' point of view. So next slide, please. Now I want to get into financial aid. And again, I want to talk about this very briefly, but very meaningfully, because I think that one of the ways that Yale is unique in that we are need blind, meaning we do not consider an applicant's ability to pay or their family's ability to pay when making admissions decisions. And we really do make a concerted effort to meet all demonstrated financial need. So I think the combination of those 2 things lead to extremely generous financial aid policies. And ultimately, we have students who feel as though this is an affordable option. So for example, parents of students with incomes less than $125,000 will likely have a 0 contribution towards their educational costs. And also for those who make between $125,000 and $165,000, those contributions are prorated. So let me hop into some of the details. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we define need? Well, very simply, it's just cost minus resources. So you can see that this is a calculated amount based upon the information that's provided and some standardized formulas. So in this particular cost is the total cost of attendance. So in our case, next slide. Okay, you can see that it is these three components. So it is tuition and fees as well as room and board. And then there are additional expenses associated with just living in New Haven and attending school. Next is the family contribution. This is the average cost that we've calculated for our M1 class last year. As you can see, that is the purple bar that you see. And then the next slide, if you could reveal that, this is our unit loan. So this is what we call required borrowing. And so once we establish the total cost and we subtract from that the applicant and family's contribution, we're left with our defined need. The first portion of that defined need is taken up with the unit loan, which as you can see is $10,000. And the remaining balance, final slide, this $75,000, this is what we're referring to as scholarship. And I have to emphasize, scholarship does not need to be repaid. So while you might have some sticker shock with that very top bar of $106,000, when you get down to it, Yale's very generous financial aid policies, as well as the resulting scholarship, can actually make Yale even more affordable than other medical schools. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? Well, this is the distribution of scholarship funding. So this is data for all MD students with need-based scholarships. And this is the distribution. As you can see, the median scholarship is a little over $76,000, and some receive more than $80,000 per year. So as you can see, of the $106,000 total cost, we have our students are actually receiving quite a bit in scholarship funding. Again, this is totally dependent upon the information that's provided in your financial aid applications. And for some students, that calculated $21,000 that happened to be the median amount for that one class, they might opt not to pay that out of pocket, and they might opt to take on additional loans, but that is really up to the individual students. Okay, next slide. So just to check in with everybody, and you can just unmute yourselves and you can shout out an answer. What do you think is the median debt upon graduation among all private medical schools in America? David, what do you think it is?
Oh, I would say 250,000.
Okay. Anyone else? Want to unmute yourselves and shout out? No?
Posted
Okay.
in the chat.
I'll go with that. Oh, it might be in the chat. Okay, so Vincent, if you wouldn't mind revealing it. And again, this is for private institutions. It is $220,000 for the class of 2023, median debt on graduation. For public medical schools, yes? Pasha, did you want to say something? No? Okay. So for public medical schools, let's see what that number is. It's $200,000. So what do you think it is for the Yale School of Medicine class of 2023? So not the ones that just graduated. We haven't finalized those numbers yet, but the ones that graduated a year ago. Vincent, if you wouldn't mind revealing. It is just a hair under $70,000, median debt upon graduation. So as you can see from this particular chart, that for those who can actually qualify for financial aid and scholarship, it can make a huge difference in terms of your median debt upon graduation relative to these numbers that are provided from the AAMC for both public and private medical schools. So with that, I would like to just go on and describe a little bit about our current first year class. As you can see, the breakdown of the 104 is 81 MD, 23 MD, PhD. It's about 50-50 split, a little bit more, a few more women than men. 28% are URIM. But one thing that I'd really like to emphasize is we really have a fair number that were born outside the US. A substantial 20% who received Pell Grants, 16% who came from rural childhood backgrounds, and 30% of the class actually came from public institutions. So I think that might be something of interest for students from UC Santa Barbara. So again, not everyone is coming from Ivy League institutions. In fact, 70% are coming from non-Ivy League
Do you
institutions.
know roughly, Nancy, about how many of this population might be Californians? I know California has a lot of applicants every year to med
Mhm.
school. Do you any idea off the top of your head where the percentage of Californian students that make up your class of 28?
So
I
do you
would
mean people who were born and raised
California
in
residents,
California,
yeah,
or okay, as opposed to those who attended
right.
California schools?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to look that
Okay.
particular.
Okay.
I would undoubtedly say that California is almost certainly our most represented state, probably by
Yeah.
quite a bit, just based on the sheer amount of applications.
Yeah.
And knowing that the UC system, especially when it comes to research, is just so respected by our faculty committee members across the board. So
For sure.
California students tend to do pretty well in our application
Great.
process.
Super. Thank you.
Absolutely. And again, those are California students who go to schools all over the place, in
Yep.
addition to California schools.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so with that, I'd just like to end with these are pictures from our white coat ceremony. We host our white coat ceremony right outside of our offices here on Harkness Lawn. It's a wonderful day of celebration, not just for the incoming first year students and their families, but everyone shows up. Students from other classes, faculty, staff. It's a great day of celebration. And it really is a fun event. And when you ask faculty, they inevitably talk about graduation and the white coat ceremony here at Yale, and the students really do cherish their memories of that particular day. So with that, I'd like to just wrap things up so that we can get to some of the questions. I know I've gone just a little bit over our time here, but again, we always like to be on that path of continuous quality improvement. So if you all wouldn't mind just using your phones and taking a quick picture of this QR code and provide us with a little bit of feedback in the form of a very brief survey, we would love it. You don't have to do it now, you can do it later, but if you wouldn't mind taking the picture now while the slide is still on the screen, I'd appreciate it very much.
All right.
Okay, and
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Vincent. We'll bring this QR code back up at the end of the session so folks can get another shot at that. So let's jump into the question and answer portion. David, I think you.
So I have a couple of things, but first off, I've done a dozen or so of these things with AdComs from around the country over starting in the summer, and you're the latest, obviously. This is far and away. I want to tell your team this. You know, you have the QR code. This is the best presentation that we have had far and away, right? As far as the insights that you offer, the candor, the myriad different kind of things you talk about your program. I know you're pitching it and you're biased, but this has been a remarkable presentation. So I want to get that out there as your instant feedback. And I'll, make sure that this is posted to our YouTube channel, and I'll encourage students to make even, after when they're watching the recording to give you all feedback as well. So question number one I have for you, tell me a little bit about where you are in the process. I have your MSAR profile up right now. My kids mostly are out-of-state applicants. I saw the 23 cohort is the last group represented in MSAR right now. 5,700 out-of-state verified applications, 600 interviews, but out of that 600, 86 out-of-state matriculants. So there is a lot of winnowing that happens between interview and matriculation. But can you tell us a little bit about where you are timeline-wise in your process this year?
Yeah, so we started accepting applications over the summer. Most of the med school applicants, at least at Yale, the majority will send their applications fairly early on. So where we are right now, we've received approximately 85% of the applications that we'll receive over the course of the year. We've been reviewing these applications since the day they started coming into us and inviting students to come and interview. Thus far, despite having read and reviewed 85% of the applications for the year, we've only issued about 2/3 of the interview invites we plan to extend for the year. So where are we? we're waiting for the last few applications to come in. Our secondary deadline is not until November 15th, so we've got just over a month of continued reception there. We're starting the process now of going back to applications that have already been read at least once to go back and see who else in that pool of applications that have been looked at already do we want to extend interview invites for. So it's I know it seemed like a while for those of you who might have submitted your application way back in May, but there's still a lot of time left in this year's application cycle.
Excellent. And second question of my three. Second question, a lot of the late MCAT takers, maybe August, September, are coming to my office. Thankfully, they did really, really well. And one of the questions they'll ask me is about yield protection. I know you would only be able to speak for Yale, but can you talk a little bit about yield protection where it pertains to YSM?
Yeah, so just to define this term for anyone who hasn't been immersed in admissions minutia for an extended amount of time. So you'll hear people talk about yield protection. In general, it's the idea that certain admissions offices will decline to admit somebody who they think would be an amazing student at their school, but they presume that that student is likely to go to a different school, a school that is perceived as a better fit for that student in some way, shape, or form. So a couple things about this. One, I'm a former law school admissions officer before I entered medical school admissions, and I will just tell you from conversations with admissions offices in a variety of fields, this is something that happens at some schools. It does not happen at the Yale School of Medicine. Our decisions are made by a committee. The committee is very proud of the students that we have enrolled at the Yale School of Medicine over the last 200 and 250 years. And there is no convincing them that there are any students who wouldn't come to Yale if the opportunity presents itself. So that is just not what happens here. But at other schools, well, here's what an admissions office will think to itself. There is a certain cost in both time and money for each student that you admit. What does this cost? One, it's the staff time in reviewing the applications, interviewing the student. It's the time in recruiting the student. It could be the expense in paying for that student to come and visit your campus. It can be in the amount of faculty time that has to be dedicated to talking to prospective students. So to eliminate or at least reduce the cost, some schools will choose to admit people if and only if they are confident that you would enroll in that school. And if you have particularly metrics that suggest that you might choose to go to a school that is perceived as just a better quality medical school for whatever reason, they might hesitate to admit you unless there's something else in your application that says, I'm definitely going to come to this school. So it is real, but it's overplayed. So it is not the case that everyone who has these fantastic metrics who doesn't get into a certain school is being yield protected. So metrics at the Yale School of Medicine and at every other school are never the be all and end all. It could be that, yes, you have a perfect GPA and a perfect MCAT score, but what you want to do doesn't match the mission of the school, whether that be about your residency or your specialty or what motivates you and things like that. It could be that despite your metrics being amazing, you don't have the experiences that the school is hoping to see. And then finally, and this is only rarely the case, but this can be the case, you might have amazing metrics and amazing experiences, but something in your application is raising a red flag. It could be some mistakes. It could just be that your attitude makes people question if you're going to be a good colleague and things like that. So it is not necessarily the case that you've been yield protected. And I would, I guess if I can issue one warning, I have never heard a story of an applicant accusing a school of yield protecting them that led to that applicant being admitted to that school. So I would maybe keep your complaints to the pre-health office and not in a letter of continued interest to the school.
I know it's a cheeky thing for me to ask an Ivy League admissions team about yield protection, but I also do really appreciate you're giving us students in particular, a more kind of comprehensive understanding of how AdComs, and they think about yield protection in larger terms. So I appreciate you're taking the time to do that. Lastly, Erik, what is the policy at YSM with respect to update letters? It's a go, no go, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, if you have something important to share with our committee, send it to us. If you've applied, you can go onto our application portal and you can upload something. I would caution you against sending us um, frequent updates, especially during the bulk of the admissions process. Just because you haven't heard back, I would not take that as an excuse to send us an update once a week. But if you have a handful of new accomplishments, if you get fresh grades, you get awards, if you're out of school and you get a new job, consolidate those all and send us an update maybe once a month or so. Now, when we get into the waitlist part of the application cycle, I would actually encourage you to be in touch a little bit more often. Um, One of the things that we and I think this is true of almost every other admissions office, at least as far as I know, when we're making decisions off the wait list, time is of the essence because we can usually only give applicants a few days to decide whether or not to accept our offer. So we tend to think, hey, do we have some reason to think that this student is still interested, that this student will be able to go and make a decision on an offer? In a short amount of time. And knowing that you've been in touch in the last couple of weeks is a strong indicator that you are still interested in the Yale School of Medicine.
Great feedback. I think that's the question. That's the extent of the questions I have at this point. As we've discussed before, we'll go ahead and stop the recording and we'll take questions from the panelists or from the students that are on here. But let me just formally stop recording.